Hey guys, Michael Hyatt here. I'm thrilled to be with you. I want to talk to you today about developing an experimental mindset. Now, this is important in church world because often people in the church are resistant to change, right? And it's difficult to sell a new idea, whether it's a new initiative, a new program, a new idea. But your job, whatever else you do, you got to sell ideas, right? You got to get people to buy into new programs, new ministry initiatives, new theological concepts, whatever it is. And sometimes that's tough, but not if you use an experimental mindset. So let me talk to you about what I mean. So back in 2014, my team was just kind of overwhelmed with email. I mean, we hated email for all the reasons you probably hate email. We were getting hundreds of messages a day. It was very difficult to keep up with all the different threads. And if you started a conversation with somebody and you were 3 messages deep into it, and then suddenly remembered you needed to include somebody else, then what do? How do you patch them into the message? It was horrible. So we found this new app called Slack. And again, this was back in 2014, right when they started. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this or not. Total game changer for our team. But at that time, we didn't know. It simply promised to be a better alternative than email. Now, I love experimenting with software applications. But my team, even though they hate email, I knew that they weren't just going to go for something new because it was a better promise, because at least email was familiar. So maybe they hated it, but it was at least familiar. So I said to the team, let's try this new thing called Slack. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, but let's just try it today and see how it goes. The only thing I want you to commit to is that we're not going to use email at all to communicate internally for this one test day. Then we'll get together at the end of the day, we'll vote, and if we all decide to go forward, then we will. And if not, no harm, no foul. At least we'll know that this was one thing that didn't work. So we set out that Friday to experiment with Slack. By the end of the day, we were having so much fun. It was so much more productive. And we saw immediately the benefits over email that I called for the vote. I said, okay, what do you guys want to do? You want to go forward? And I would suggest, and this is what I said to them, I want to suggest that we try it for another week just to make sure that, the initial shine doesn't wear off and that it's something we're still excited about. But let's try it for another week. What do you guys think? To the person, they voted unanimously. And I think there were about 20 people on my team at that time. There's about 35 now, so it was a much smaller team. So we tried it for the next week. And the only tool that we used for internal communication was Slack. Even people that were reticent, even people that were skeptical at the outset, within that first week, they got convinced. At the end of that first week, I called for the vote again. I said, what do you guys think? Do you want to continue or do you want to go back to email? They said, absolutely, we don't want to go back to email. Let's keep using Slack. We have not looked back. We continue to use Slack to this day. We're evangelists for it. We love it. It has replaced email for us, at least for internal communications. And by the way, if you haven't tried it, I would recommend that you try it as an experiment. Now, I want to talk about experimentation in terms of its benefits. Why would you develop an experimental mindset? Here are 4 benefits. Number 1, experimentation keeps you from thinking you have to get it perfect before you commit. Now, this is something that, afflicts all of us. I don't care if you're in church world or even in the business world, but perfectionism is the mother of procrastination. And so often we don't want to try something new until we get it, right. 100% locked and loaded. We want to make sure that we have all the bugs worked out. We've overcome all the objections. And so we just procrastinate, and we never see the change that we want to see. So this is when your organization gets bogged down in the status quo. So that's the first benefit. Second benefit, experimentation enables you to gather data you would otherwise never get. I mean, you can argue conceptually all you want about whether something's going to work or not work. And the only way sometimes to find out is actually to get out there in the market and try it. Uber, for example, in 2018, they launched a major new initiative, and I'm just looking at my notes here, called Express Pool Service. They didn't know if it would work or didn't work, so they launched it as an experiment. Guess what? It worked. It's a major new offering for Uber. But they could have argued till they were blue in the face, but they didn't have the data they need to make that decision. So experimentation gave them the opportunity to try it without actually committing. Third benefit, experimentation enables those who are not yet sold to give it a try before fully buying. Look, the research indicates that 70% of change initiatives fail. Now, I want to tell you why. It's because there's this inner resistance to change. So a lot of people dig in their heels, they resist, they might even subconsciously, not knowingly, of course, especially Christians, but they subconsciously sabotage the work that is taking place or the change that you're trying to create. So if you frame it up as an experiment with the idea that the conclusion is going to be tentative, you're just going to give it a try, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, you go back to the status quo. That kind of lowers people's resistance, keeps them from sabotaging, and might even enable them to give you the data that you need to make the best decision possible. Fourth benefit of developing an experimental mindset. Experimentation allows you to change your mind. So get this. Last summer, I decided I was going to grow a beard. I thought, hey, that's a good idea. I need a new look. You know, it's about time for my third midlife crisis. So I think I'll grow a beard. So I did grow a beard. And, I thought it looked pretty awesome. And I even posted on social media, and lots of people told me they liked the new look. They thought it made me look younger. A few people said they thought it made me look older, but it didn't matter. But here's the deal. About 2 months into it, and by the way, I even had a photo shoot done, an entire social media photo shoot done with this beard. Well, a couple months into it, about a week after we did that photo shoot, I thought to myself, I don't love it. And I don't really hate it, but I think I want to go back to that clean cut look and shave. And so I did. But here's the thing about it. The experimentation gave me the opportunity to change my mind, because when I framed it up, when I sold it on social media, when I told my followers I was going to go to a beard, even when I told my own team, and even when I told my own wife, I said, hey, I'm not committing to a beard for the rest of my life. I'm just going to try it as an experiment. That allowed me to change my mind without any shame, without any regret. I just said, hey, it was an experiment. I liked it for a while. I don't like it now, so I shaved. No big deal. Okay, so when should you use this approach? So I want you to think about some major change initiative that you're trying to institute in your church or your nonprofit organization, okay? It may be big, it may be small, but you sense there's going to be some resistance, okay? So when should you use this approach? First of all, when you find yourself procrastinating, So let me give you another example from my personal life. So several years ago, I became a runner. I was having no difficulty doing cardio. I loved running. I loved the exercise. I loved the dopamine. I loved the endorphins. I loved all that stuff from running. But I was really having problem making progress on strength training. Every time I'd go to the gym and I'd think about strength training, I was kind of like overwhelmed with all the options, all the different weight options. How do I do it? All that stuff. And so I thought, probably what I should do, in fact, a friend of mine suggested I do this. Why don't you hire a personal trainer who could actually work out with you, show you the ropes, teach you how to lift the weights to do it safely and with the proper form, and see if you can make some progress that way. But I still found myself procrastinating because, a personal trainer can be expensive, right? So here's how I sold it to myself. I said, hey, why don't I just try this as an experiment? And so I did that as a 90-day experiment. I said, I'm going to try this for 90 days. I'm going to check the results, see if in fact I've grown in strength, if I enjoy the experience, and if this is something I want to keep doing. After 90 days, I said, yes, I love strength training. I feel confident now. I like the way I'm starting to look. And especially as I get older, I like what this is going to do for my stamina, for my balance, for my endurance, and for all the rest. So I've had a strength trainer now, somebody that works out with me. And I've had that for years and years and years, probably 10 years now. But I felt myself procrastinating, and that should be the trigger for you. When you find yourself procrastinating, what can you do as an experiment to try to overcome that? Here's a second reason or a second kind of situation where you should try this approach. When you're trying to sell a reluctant audience. So when I took my first 30-day sabbatical after I'd left the corporate world, I was the CEO of Thomas Nelson. Many of you know that. Thomas Nelson Publishers, largest Bible publishing company in the world. But when I left that job to pursue my dream as an author, speaker, and business coach, I took a 30-day sabbatical, and Gail and I went off and prayed and thought about what was next. And one of the things she encouraged me to do on that sabbatical was she said, hey, why don't you start journaling? Let me tell you what my response was. I'm not proud of it, but I rolled my eyes. I said, babe, I've tried journaling. I'm not a journaler. I don't want to journal. That sounds totally boring. Now, I'm going to tell you something, a little secret. Inside, I was kind of terrified. Because even though I'm a writer, the idea of looking at a blank page and pouring out my feelings or my innermost thoughts, I didn't even know what journaling was. So I thought, I'm not sure I can do this. Now get this. So I'm totally resistant, totally reluctant. Here's how Gail sold it to me. She said, okay, I'm not asking you to commit to journaling for the rest of your life. But honestly, by your own admission, you've never been a journaler, so you don't even know what you might be missing. Maybe you're not missing anything, but maybe you're missing something that could be transformational for you. Well, that kind of got my attention. She said, why don't you try it for 21 days? If you do it for the next 21 days, by the way, we're into our sabbatical for about 7 days, so this was like the remainder of my sabbatical. She said, if you do it for 21 days and decide it's not for you, no problem. I'll get off your back and you'll at least know that this is not for you. So I said, okay, I can try that. I started journaling. First day, tough. Second day, a little bit easier. Third day, a little bit easier. Fourth day, started to get into it. Well, I've been journaling consistently ever since 2011, since I left Thomas Nelson. I've got now thousands of journal entries. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's part of my morning ritual. I wouldn't think of starting the day without journaling. It's that important to me. But it all began when Gail began to sell a very reluctant customer, which was me. And that's what got me to buy into it. Okay, a third situation where you might want to use this approach. When you need experimental input to get it right. So let's admit, a lot of the times when we're starting a program, we're launching a new initiative, we don't really have all the data points that we need for it to succeed. We need more input, but we kind of got to get in motion to do that. We've sat in our ivory towers long enough. We've sat in the sort of the theoretical lab, and we've figured out to the best of our ability, but now we need some real live user data, a real live data in order to get it right. So this happened when we introduced the Full Focus Planner. Now, you may be familiar with our planner. It's an analog, yes, paper planner. Some people say, are you a Neanderthal? We've got digital planners. Look, there's something about getting out of the digital space, and I'm totally digital. I love digital everything. I'm a total geekaholic. But when it comes to staying focused, especially on my most important priorities, I love doing that in a paper planner. So we came up with this paper planner called the Full Focus Planner. We knew it wasn't perfect. We knew that we could probably improve it, but we got it as far as we could, probably about 80% of the way, and we decided to manufacture it. So we shipped a less than perfect product, knowing that once users began to use it, they would give us feedback and we would be able to improve it. And oh my gosh, did they ever give us feedback? Tons of email. Social media posts, people stopping me in Franklin, Tennessee, where I live, who were using the planner and saying, hey, this is great, but if you did this. So then every change we proposed, we created this special private Facebook group for our users. We had 10,000 people in that group. And every time they proposed a change, I would literally myself mock up the page, submit it to that Facebook group and say, here's how we're thinking about changing it. What do you think? And they weighed in by the hundreds. People were saying things like, we love that. That'll be awesome. When can we get our hands on it? All the way to, we hate that. What are you thinking? Don't you dare. But we got all this input once we had a product in the market, but before we committed to the next edition. So I call that the power of incremental improvement over time. So we were able to incrementally improve this over time. Why? Because we got user input. We allowed ourselves to conduct an experiment and take the experiment to the next level. Okay, so maybe, hopefully, as you're listening to me, you're thinking to yourself, okay, that sounds intriguing. I've got something I'd like to change in my church or my association of churches or in my small group or something. I want to propose a change. I know there's going to be resistance, so maybe I can frame it up as an experiment. So how do you get started? And I want to just share with you a couple of points of how you get started. First of all, be alert to resistance. This is something that I'm very alert to. When I sense it in myself or sense it in other people, I kind of think that I'm on the edge of something important. Now, sometimes people are just resisting me because they're trying to keep me from doing something stupid. So that's a good thing. That's a God-given thing. That's providence. I like that. But sometimes it's because there's a big change that creates that resistance that needs to happen. And that resistance could be in me, it could be in other people, but be alert for it and see it as an opportunity to conduct an experiment. Second, when you're trying to sell this to other people, emphasize the low risk. Emphasize the low risk. For example, when I was proposing changing over to Slack, I said, hey, we're just going to try this for a day. We're not going to trash our email systems. We're not swearing off email for the rest of our lives. We're just going to try this low risk system for a day. If we don't like it, we can always go back. Same thing with Gail when she's proposing to me that I start journaling. If I didn't like it after 21 days, I could stop. Not a big investment, not a big change to make. And she just emphasized the low risk. So people sometimes who are resistant change or are resistant to change because they're risk adverse. So you got to emphasize the low risk. You're not, and this is, by the way, why when you go drive a car or decide to buy a new car, they don't say to you, hey, give me a check for the car, right? They don't say, give me a check for the car and you can test drive it. No, they say, hey, why don't you take a test drive? It's low risk. In fact, when I bought the BMW that I have now, which I love, by the way, this is the third BMW I've had. You know what they said to me the first time I went in, because I never owned a BMW? They said, why don't you take it for a test drive? I finished it. I finished that test drive. I said, this is amazing. I love this. This might be the ultimate driving machine. They said, well, why don't you take it home for the weekend, see what your wife thinks, and then you can tell us on Monday whether you want to keep it or not. Well, that was low risk. I mean, who could resist that? I'd have the car for a weekend. It'd be fun to take out with Gail and let her drive it. So emphasize the low risk. This is the principle of letting the person take the puppy home on a trial basis. How many of those puppies do you think come back to the pet store? That's right, not many, but they don't sell it as, by the way, here is this pooping machine that you're going to have to keep for the rest of your life. No, they sell it as a low risk. Don't you want to take this cute puppy home for the weekend? See what the kids think, see what your wife thinks. Well, who's going to resist that? You're going to be a hero by doing that. Okay, third point, set a specific time frame. So people need to know that the experiment is not going to go on forever because they may not want to commit to forever. They may want to just try it as an experiment, but there needs to be a time frame. So I would suggest the shortest amount of time possible to still validate the test results, but keep it as short as you possibly can. So if it could be a 1-day test, a 7-day test, a 21-day test, a 3-month test, but something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end so that people know there's an exit point if it's not going to work out. So again, just in conclusion, I want to ask you, what is it you're trying to change? And by the way, as the Church of Jesus Christ, we ought to be changing things all the time. We ought to be a change agent for good, right? Jesus Christ came into the world to change us and to change the world, but that world is resistant. And so one of the best ways to sell that change is to frame it up as an experiment. Hope that's helpful. I'd love to hear from you if it is, but thanks for this opportunity to share it with you. See you later.